So welcome everybody. I appreciate you who have come for this presentation on Gestalt couples therapy. It's weird not being able to see you. Luckily, Alberta Pos, who's the host hosting this one, she's staying on, so I have a face I can look at rather than just a screen, so I know if the penny hits the water at least. This film is 2 sessions with the same couple during the same week. It is edited. My individual films are not edited, they're in real time, but with couples it takes a little longer. And I work with my co-therapist, who is also my wife, Rita Resnick, who is also a Ph.D. psychologist. And this was a few summers ago with a couple. We were doing our summer training it was in Ljubljana, Slovenia, which is the northern part of what used to be Yugoslavia. We've been developing this model of couples therapy for probably 50 some odd years. Rita only about 35 because she likes to say she's much younger. Basically, I'm going to say very little about the model because I want you to see the reality, the film, and then have time for comments and questions and comparisons. What is different about our model is, coming from a Gestalt perspective, we use a field lens. And the field lens shows the culture, which is the history of the field, that's ongoing. So the model of marriage, which in Western culture is a fusion model of marriage, two become one. And as we like to say, two become one and then there are none. Most people know that first marriages in Western countries is about 55% divorce rate. But when people do it the second time, it's 75% divorce rate. And that's the proverbial tip of the iceberg. If you look in the literature would have you believe that the 45% who didn't get divorced, therefore must be happily married. Wrong. When you talk to people confidentially, many of them are there for not the reasons they wanted to get married in the first place. They stay because of the children. They stay because they're terrified to be alone. They stay because of financial reasons and lifestyle. They stay because of religion. They stay because of avoiding social stigma of being a failure. We call those people, which is some very unfortunately large percent of the 45% that stay married, the secretly miserably married. When you add the secretly miserably married, you notice that, 55% of them have an explosion, rupture, and divorce, and some large, unidentified clearly, but a large proportion of the 45% implode and submit to quiet desperation or loud desperation. The fusion model of marriage makes it very difficult because difference is not allowed. And most models of couples therapy work very hard at trying to get rid of difference. We don't. We appreciate difference, although it has a lousy reputation. Difference is usually seen as critical. Difference is seen as a betrayal. Difference is seen as a threat to my autonomy or a threat to my connection. For us, difference is the currency of contact. That the only way you can have contact with another human being is through difference. And contact by itself is not enough. In order to have a connection and an ongoing connection, you need contact and withdrawal and the movement between. Because the basic human dilemma that all of us deal with from birth till death is how to be connected to an other and maintain a self. It's very easy to become confluent fused, but you lose yourself. It's also easy to become totally withdrawn, but you lose the other. So that their movement is required for maintaining connection between contact and withdrawal. So what we advocate, instead of a fusion model of marriage, a connection model of marriage. The fusion model was probably useful for survival some tens of thousands of years ago, but things have changed. The environment has changed. People don't die so young anymore, and survival is not what marriage is about for many people today. Although for emotional survival or social survival, unfortunately, it still is. So this particular film, though, is really not about difference and how they deal with difference, because we submit that most couples' issues have to do with how they deal with difference, not what the differences are. Of course, there are a few differences where that is the issue, but mostly, by far, it's how people deal with difference. This session, however, is about connection and the loss of connection, the interruptions to connection with the characterological issues of both people in the couple. So what we do is we use the interruptions to contact as the currency of contact. Since from a Gestalt perspective, contact is the sharing of your immediate experience, and if the other is receptive, and even better yet, responsive, the synapse between my experience and your experience is the sparkle that contact happens. You can make conversation, you can't make contact. Contact, you can have the conditions and hope that the spark will jump the synapse. So we're going to play the film now. Sit back. It's 2 sessions, and there are subtitles. So you'll hear the person's English. They have a bit of an accent. They're European people, and the woman is a therapist, and the man is more in organizational development, but they both do organizational work, and she does psychotherapy work as well. However, this is not a role play. This is not a script. These are real people dealing with their issues with Rita and with myself. So I'm interested in people's reactions and comments and questions and comparisons, both theoretically and clinically.
There's one question that was basically a question about, do you work in teams all the time? Because this video is of you and your wife working together with this couple. So that was one question.
We only have the luxury of doing that when we do training, and then we do work together as a team. But that's a luxury, both because of time and money. So usually half my practice is couples and half of Rita's practice is couples, roughly. And occasionally we'll see a couple together. Not that frequently, again, because 2 of us is better, but it's not twice as good. And people don't want to pay twice as much money, and we don't want to work for half. It's occasional. We did have one trainee, a psychologist, who wanted both of us to see her parents. Her parents were both physicians, and she said, "It'll take 2 of you," and she was right, because they both talked a lot. They both had very operating mouths, but neither of them had any ears. So it was pretty hard to get in there to even make space for each other, because they weren't listening to each other. It was sequential monologues, not dialogue. But no, only when we do training do we do that, or rare exceptions.
Let me ask you a personal question myself, because I've worked with couples, and the issue is one of basically, it seems to me that there's a great deal of difficulty in people saying enough. Like they say something, but they don't say enough. So it's like teaching people how to say the whole thing that's important.
Yeah.
Like something's left out that's really important, that's harder to say, or doesn't want to be said, and that's the very thing that's the most important.
Exactly. I mean, it's not capricious that they don't say. They don't say because, as you also referenced, it's difficult to say. It's vulnerable to say, to share the ground of where what you're doing or saying or not doing where that comes from. Those are the interruptions to
Right.
self-regulation. And again, the exquisite part of Gestalt therapy, as far as I'm concerned, is we don't have to change people for them to connect. All we have to do is support them to share the difficulties in connection. That's connective tissue.
Right.
As I said, currency of contact is immediate experience.
Exactly.
To me, this was a good example of two people, each of them characterologically getting in the way of the present situation. The first session identified the woman's characterological difficulties in being seen wanting. The shame that came up for her about being seen wanting, like it's not just that the want or the not getting, but to be seen that way, which would make it very difficult for her to be fully present. And in the second session, there was more emphasis on the characterological interruptions of the man, where as a teenage boy being so hurt, so upset, scared of hearing no. So he doesn't want to put himself in the position of hearing no. So you have the woman in the position of, I don't want to be seen wanting physical contact, and the man saying, I don't want to be seen wanting because I could risk getting a no. And the two characterological styles of perceiving and reacting to the world interface in a way that is not satisfying for either of them. So the sharing of that begins to move them to more contact in the service of connection. You started to say something, Alberta?
No, I was just thinking that it's a beautiful choreography of two people who are missing each other like ships in the night.
Yeah, and it's a very
And
unfortunate.
it's very clear
topic.
they both really care about each other.
Yes, exactly. And they're both of goodwill. I mean, we're very fortunate to get couples like that. They don't always come with such goodwill.
No, they don't. I had a couple that fired me, to be honest, because they were so distressed. And they were just one of these people. They was one of these couples where there was nothing I could do that would be helpful. They were determined to be at war, and they were at war.
Yeah. And to me, it's interesting when people are at war to inquire as to what's at stake.
Exactly, because I've been in couples therapies where I feel like I have a sunburn when I come out of the session. It's like I feel like it's been like a battle royale, and I've been in the middle of it, and it's been wonderful, actually.
Yeah,
it's been fantastic. And so they're embarrassed because they've let it all hang out, and I'm like saying to them, "This is fabulous." It takes usually weeks before we can get to this level, and you put it right out there.
Yeah. But how couples deal with difference, war is one of them. And it's probably the worst one.
Yeah.
The other two stereotypic ways that they deal with difference, one is that they defer and become pseudo-confluent with the other, making believe.
Right.
But
Right.
the problem with that is they lose themselves. They're not there. They're not there representing their voice and their needs. The other way is they withdraw. And they withdraw and
stonewalling.
And then they end up losing the other. So the third and the worst one, but most couples do this one, is they try to get rid of the difference by making the other like them. Of course, the other pushes back, or even worse, tries to do the same thing, make the first person like them. Now, difference turns into conflict. Conflict is the attempt to get rid of difference by changing the other. That's true at the couples level, it's true at the group level, it's true at the geopolitical level. When one country tries to change another to make them like the first country, economically, religiously, culturally, however it is, and the
Yeah.
other one resists. Now you have conflict and escalation, an explosion, a pop, and a withdrawal in that
And resentment.
order. Right. And usually, because frequently couples are very embarrassed about some of the trivia that they will argue about and get into a conflict about, because it's not about the content. It's about the, from my point of view, mistaken belief that there's only one reality. So that if I don't convince you, I'm going to be defined by you. So now we're
Exactly.
getting, it's not what color the coffee cup was, it's much more of an existential issue now of who's going to define reality here. And if it's not
Oh,
me, it will be you, and I will be colonized by your point of view. So now it's a fight for survival. Frequently,
my
people will
goodness, we
come in
have a
and,
question.
okay.
There it is. It says, what would you consider, this is from a Sarah Paulina. She says, what would you consider to be a good therapeutic outcome for couples? Could it also be each one going their own way, like like having a divorce, helping someone divorce?
Absolutely, absolutely. To me, if a couple separates, divorces, especially if they have some shared ground, if they have kids, if they have years in extended family together, for them to rupture that and divorce when they have never really authentically showed up, that's tragic. If, on the other hand, they authentically show up and they are really not compatible, there may not be anything wrong with either of them. You don't have to pathologize them. They may be under the bell curve, but they are not a fit. Then to go apart is a good thing. It's a success for both of them and an opportunity, now that they know more about how to show up authentically, to go to the next people that they're going to be involved with, showing up as they are. Simply put, you can never find out if you're compatible unless you fully show up. So I don't have the goal of holding them together, and I don't have the wisdom to know when they should be apart. I do have the knowledge that if they show up authentically, the reality will unfold and reflect whether they are or are not compatible. So when a couple has been together for a while and we're in for divorce, and it becomes clear that they both have never shown up, I tell them about that bias, and that I would suggest to spend a few months showing up and letting what happens happen. Then if the real you is both there and it doesn't fit, get out of there. But not to do it preemptively, prematurely, when you don't really know if you're compatible enough or not, because you're going to turn around and do the same damn thing again.
Exactly. There's someone made an observation. And I'm sorry I missed this before because it was ahead of the last question. It was just by a gentleman whose name is Perry McIntosh. And the observation was the couple swap positions between sessions. And he says, this appeared to me to be both spatially and in their relationship to each other. How does that sound to you?
I think we changed their position. I don't think they did that. And we did that just to be different, so it isn't always the woman sitting next to the leader and a man next to the man, or if it's a lesbian couple or a gay couple with the same person, because we want to be alliance with both of them, not representatives of either of them.
I noticed that actually.
Say more. You noticed what?
Another comment another question by Perry McIntosh is, do you have any thoughts about contempt in relationships?
Well, yes, of course.
Gottman says that's one of the four. I mean, John Gottman, who's at the University of Washington, he calls it contempt one of the four apocalypses of a marriage.
Yeah, I'm well familiar with that, and I agree that contempt is very toxic.
It's vile.
It's more than just anger. It's a putting down, an anger, a wanting to hurt, There's
Punishing.
nothing redeeming in contempt, and it doesn't allow any space for the other. It's just, it's a final word on that particular topic. So yeah, contempt is really toxic.
Oh my goodness, now I have another question.
Okay.
It says, how can we, that I missed as well. It says, how can we as therapists act correctly and ethically when we empathize significantly more with one individual than the other? That's a good point. That's a good question.
Yeah, and I think it would be important to cop to that, to not to become their gladiator, but to cop to what you notice about you. And you're becoming, that I'm becoming, I'm much more empathetic to what you're saying than I am to what you're saying, and I don't know what's going on here. That you know, because theoretically, both people are entitled to be who they are. But
this is when I use, I mean, let me just say that this is when I actually think about countertransference. I think about, what is it about, why am I feeling so positive about her or about him and so negative about you? It's like there's something, what is the function of that? I don't know. Yeah,
I would go to a broader category than countertransference, which to me is no different than transference. And transference, as far as I'm concerned, is character in motion. Transference is like any other part of character. It's something that was organized at one time under one set of conditions that is now automatically organizing perceptions and meaning making and or organizing responding. So yes, I mean, typical, very obvious kinds of things. If you had a pushy, controlling mother and a couple walks in and the woman is pushy and controlling, you know, that will very well may push some buttons in you. And at that point, to be able to cop to that, to be able to acknowledge that, which is why therapists' own therapy is so important, because therapy is not going to make you perfect. It'll help you get better, but it would also help you identify where your difficulties are, where your issues are, and where you can be triggered, and that you can be transparent with them in a therapy session with a couple, which also functions as a modeling for them to be able to share those kinds of things.
The other thing I think about too is that the question that came about a long time ago about whether it was good to help someone divorce, not just be together. I thought to myself, what was I just had a brain freeze now. It's end of the day. It'll come back to me. You go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, frequently, I was saying this before almost, and then a question came in. Frequently is too much, but sometimes a couple will come in where one of them really doesn't have goodwill or good faith. They're not coming in good faith. They're coming to get a stamp on the ass that we even went to therapy, to couples therapy. We even went to marriage counseling and it didn't work. They want support to get out, but to be able to see themselves as a good person. So they're not really interested in looking. They're not really interested in sharing. They're interested in just being able to go through the motions. And that has to become explicit about what they're there and what's important to them about that.
Do you have an agreement at the beginning of whether this couple wants to stay together or not? Like, for example, say I go in with my husband and I want to save our marriage, and he's already having an affair and he's having a great time. He don't want to stay in the marriage. What would you do with us?
Well, first of all, I'd be appreciative that you're explicit about it. Rarely are people explicit about that. But when they are, that can be useful. It's not easy, but it's certainly useful to, okay, so you want this marriage to end, you're not really interested, to see if it can work. And if that's clear, then I'm interested in what you're here for. I mean, you're not waiting for a bus. Everybody wants something. And I'm very clear at the beginning of the session, and so is Rita, of asking people what they want. And if you buy the card, I don't want anything, I'm just here to please him. Well, then you're here because you want to please him.
Him, yeah.
Well, no, I don't. Because if you don't hold their feet to the fire about what it is they want. What are they doing there? If you don't hold their feet to the fire and get some clarity on what that is, they will pull that card every time you get close to anything.
Exactly. I kind of think to myself, some people want to leave, they want help to leave, and other people want to stay and they want help to stay.
Exactly. And one of the things I frequently say is, even if one of you dragged the other one in here, at the very least, the draggee wants the dragger off their back.
So here's another question. This is from Melvi Mergua. And she says, would you, or I don't know if it's a he or she, Melvi, whatever that is, would you be willing to share an example of dealing with repeated infidelity in a relationship and outcome? So for example, say I have a husband who cheats on me over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Well,
do you ever get examples of that where you get a couple where one other couple is repeatedly unfaithful?
Yes. And the other part of the couple is typically not okay with that, but they also become kind of self-loathing that they go along with it. That, you know, why is it
victimized?
Why do I put up with this? Why do I go on with that? Now, there are occasional people who say, look, it's just sex. That's all. It's usually him. Not always, but usually. It's what he calls sport fucking, and it has nothing to do with our relationship. And, you know, as long as it doesn't impinge on our relationship or threaten our relationship, I can live with that. That's different, if they really mean it, than someone who feels so badly that he or she goes along with and keeps buying into somebody whose mouth doesn't match their feet. Because most of them will say, okay, I won't do that. It was, you know, but then they do it again and again and again. How many times are you going to be surprised by the same thing? And what's going on with you that you go along with this? And if it's really okay with you, then so be it. But clearly you're complaining about it and you're hurt about it, but it seems even more so that you're self-critical that you go along. Because it may be that they're terrified to be alone. Again, some of the nefarious reasons that people stay married. You're afraid you won't make it, you'll be existentially alone, you won't make it materially, socially, etc. So it may be out of fear. But to instead of interpret, that to do essentially a phenomenological inquiry as to what the meaning is to that person.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's the end of all of our questions. So I'm going to, since it's almost overtime anyway, I thought we might end here. What I'm going to do is I have to put on my screen, I'm going to mute you and mute myself. We have to wait 20 seconds and then we can end and have a nice little chat together.
Okay, I want to thank you publicly, Alberta.
Thank you
for hosting this and coming up with some good questions, particularly in the face of having a paucity of questions from whoever.
We got some questions after a while.
Yeah, we got a few. Yeah. Okay, thank you, and thank you all for coming. Contact me if you have any questions after you sit with this for a while. Website at coupleofindividuals.com.